If you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, or you suffer from gestational diabetes, or there's a family history of diabetes in your family, you have probably been told to cut down the amount of sugar you're eating. But what if I told you that only one of the three main sources of sugar in your diet actually tastes sweet? Yes, you are probably doing all that you can to cut down on the sweet tasting things, obvious sources of sugar, but you're leaving on the table two other things, or should I say you're taking in two other things, right, that are carrying your blood sugar levels high and maybe even higher than the sweet things that you're avoiding. Well, in today's video, I am going to explain to you and show you the three different sources of sugar in your diet, and the fact that only one of these things tastes sweet and one of the two that doesn't taste sweet actually carries your blood glucose levels up higher than table sugar. All right, well, let's get into this video. We're going to use a whiteboard here to explain to you the three main sources of glucose, right? So that's the sugar we worry about in diabetes, the three main sources of glucose in your diet, right? The first one is the most obvious, and that is table sugar, okay? Now, table sugar, it's a double, right? A double sugar, okay? So the glucose is a single sugar, and that's what we worry about in diabetes. But table sugar is two single sugars bonded together, okay? So table sugar is equal to glucose plus fructose, okay? Fructose. So you can think of the table sugar, as a two-car train, all right? So one train car and another train car, and this one is glucose and this one is fructose. When you take this into your body, right, table sugar, these two sugars bonded together, your digestive enzymes break this bond, and so you have free glucose, right? And you have free fructose floating around in your blood, okay? So that is one form of glucose in your diet, and it's the obvious form. It's the thing that tastes sweet. Of course, you're going to get sugar from anything sweet: juices, fruit, candy, chocolates, your cereals, or everything that has added sugar, okay? Now, the second source of glucose, sugar, in your diet, right, and one that is overlooked, it is going to be milk, right, which has a milk sugar called lactose, right? So let's just say milk sugar, right, which is equal to lactose. And what lactose is, table sugar is glucose plus fructose. Lactose, right, is equal to glucose plus galactose, right? So these are the two simple sugars that make up the milk sugar, lactose. And so just like we have a two-car train here with table sugar, you have a two-car train as well, right, for lactose. So this is one car, the glucose car, right? And then it's attached to the other, like a train car, galactose, right? And when you drink it, right, or eat anything dairy, this bond is broken by your digestion, and so you have free glucose, and free galactose in your bloodstream, okay? So these two, right, lactose and then table sugar, which is actually sucrose. I should have put that here. Table sugar is sucrose, right? So you have sucrose, which breaks down into these two, and then you have lactose, right? So this is one source of sugar. This is second source of sugar. And then our third source of sugar, or glucose in the diet, right? And this is the thing that tricks a lot of you, but you kind of know, but you don't really understand what the deal is, right? So the third form of sugar, glucose in your diet, right, overlooked because it's not sweet, it is starch. All right. Now, why starch is a big deal is because we talked about how sucrose, table sugar, is a double, right? Two simple sugars bonded together, okay? And then we have lactose, two simple sugars, glucose and galactose, glucose and fructose. But guess what starch is? Starch is, right, so starch is a multi-car train, okay? Multiple simple sugars bonded together. That's what starch is, right? But guess what and this chain goes on and on and on, right? Guess what all these simple sugars are? These simple sugars are all glucose, all right? So essentially, starch is a multi-car glucose train, all right? And so just like how you have this bond broken, right? So you get glucose, fructose, glucose, galactose. With starch, when the bond is broken, all these bonds are broken when you eat starch, right? And what you have is pure glucose, 100% glucose, okay? So starch, right, is 100% glucose, okay? Let's write that down here so you see it. Starch, 100% glucose, whereas lactose, so milk sugar and table sugar, right? Milk and sugar, those are 50% glucose, right? So with your table sugars, 50%, right? So if you have the same amount of table sugar, same amount of lactose, same amount of starch, right? Broadly speaking, that's not gonna make it because you're not gonna have that much sugar, right? But say for example, you have the same amount, you're gonna only get 50% glucose from the table sugar, 50% glucose from the milk sugar, but you're gonna get 100%. All of the sugars in starch is glucose. So therefore, the same amount of starch as these will carry your blood glucose levels up higher, twice as high compared to table sugar and lactose. And therein lies the problem, and therein is the trap and the confusion, because you have cut out all the obviously sweet things, but your blood glucose levels are still high. Now, lactose, we said sucrose, that's anything sweet. Lactose, that's anything dairy. So it's going to be your milk, obviously, your yogurt, your kefir, even a little bit in cheese as well, right? And then your starch is going to be your rice, your potatoes, your crackers, your biscuits, your breakfast cereals, all the oats, grains, right, to an extent, right? Well, those are starch, but I mean, let's talk with the 100% glucose. That's going to be simple starches. So all those pure starches like your white rice, right? There's no fiber in that. Your white flour, your white white flour pasta, right? So white flour crackers. Those are essentially going to be 100% glucose, right? Now, the thing about this, right, is that when you see this, it makes you realize, okay, well, if this is the case, it means that I should not, like, for example, if you're looking at starch, since this gives me 100% glucose, it means that I should not have pure starch. I shouldn't have plain starch. If I'm going to have starch, I'm going to have my starch with other things so that I slow down and block all these little glucose bits, all these little glucose molecules. I want to have this starch with something that will block these glucoses here, right? Block the path of entry of these little sugar molecules into your bloodstream, okay? So that's where your protein comes in, your fiber comes in, your fat comes in, your healthy fat. Now, where lactose or milk sugar is concerned, now milk, whole milk, it's a complete food. So it already, even though it has the milk sugar, it comes naturally with other things. It comes naturally with fat. It comes naturally with protein. So it comes naturally with other things that will slow down how quickly that sugar gets into your bloodstream, so you don't have to worry as much. Starch in its natural form, in some cases, not necessarily all, but in many cases it's going to come with fiber. So that's where your brown rice comes in, right? If you have like wheat, whole wheat is going to have fiber from the bran, and it's going to have some fat and some protein from the germ of the wheat, right? If you're having whole wheat, okay? If you're having things like potatoes with the skin, then you're going to have a little more fiber with them, right? So that is how you look at these and you're like, oh my goodness, can't I eat any of these things? You absolutely can, but you just want to combine them with other things, and you want to do whole milk instead of that processed milk where the fat is taken out. And you can refer to a video I did before where I compare whole milk and fat-free milk, and that video is going to give you an even better understanding of the best type of milk to choose if you are a dairy person, right? Talking about milk again quickly, fermented milk, and I've done videos before on fermented milk, kefir. When milk is, you have fermented forms of milk, yogurt, like a more natural type of yogurt, or kefir, the fermentation process eats up some of the milk sugar. And so those types of milk, fermented milk, is going to have less lactose. It's going to have less milk sugar floating around, right? But suffice it to say that as somebody who you're trying to keep your blood glucose levels under control, you've cut out obviously sweet things, but you're still struggling with getting your blood sugar under control, and it's probably because you're getting glucose. That's the thing we measure for diabetes, pre-diabetes and so on. You're getting glucose from no longer from sweet things, but you're still getting glucose from dairy, and you're definitely getting glucose from the starch. And especially if you're having starch and maybe even milk, but it's fat-free milk, and you're having these forms of glucose plain, right, without anything else, then you're still going to be struggling with your blood sugar levels, right? Bottom line is definitely have food closest to its natural form as possible, because in that way you're going to not just get pure glucose, pure sugar, but you're going to get sugar with fiber, and you're going to get it with naturally occurring fat, and you can combine this with protein if there's not already protein mixed in with these natural foods. I hope you found this video helpful, and as usual, if you found this video helpful, share it with someone else who would benefit from this vital information. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.